Vale of Pewsey and the River Avon and go to the Bristol Channel and into the Irish Sea. And if we just keep on going, if we just keep going down there, I reckon we walk long enough, maybe with a paddle, or if you just came walking straight out the door, you'd come up there probably in about 6 weeks. A bit wet, probably.
Maybe.
A bit wet
Maybe
and tired.
so.
Yeah. So that sort of brings things. I'm wearing my Norwegian sweater.
Very nice.
Because it's quite. I get this from Norwegians.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah. So, right. Well, why don't we introduce ourselves? You're obviously a very famous abductee contactee, as such. Is that right?
Well, I don't know how famous I am, but I am a contactee.
But you've written a book, and you've got joined up writing, and you've organized yourself to do that, and that's a big deal. So why don't I put the laptop on, and then I won't be able to do that. This gets difficult. Oh damn! For you to see it, I will do that. Okay, so there is your, and let's just skip through that. Okay, there you are. You're in an alien abduction. Help, never be afraid ever. Now, what does that mean? Exactly.
Never be afraid ever. Well, that's kind of my motto. Just because in my experiences, I've found out that having fear kind of takes the control away from you, and being afraid never helps you. So, I've had to deal with some pretty scary experiences, and I've learned to just put my fear aside, and that allows me to be in control of the situation. And so that's my motto, and it's my YouTube. Well, it was my YouTube channel. I recently shut that down though because of the whole censorship thing.
Well, we can't talk about that. This isn't going to go on YouTube. Well, it might. I don't know. But let's just see where you come from. I mean, this is. Are you an American, or are you where is this beautiful beach?
That beautiful beach is in Uruguay, South America.
Right.
That's where I live now with my husband, John. And I was in the United States. I grew up in the United States, but we left in 2014 because we could see that things were getting pretty bad there.
Well, just before we finish that, go into the details of that, we then got some lovely horse riders. And that's where are we talking about? Uruguay? Is that the right country?
Yes. Uruguay is...
Get the country right, Miles. And there's some mountains. And very nice. And your book. Okay. So we'll bring that back. Okay. So explain what the situation is. You're American. You decided to leave the United States. So what happened?
Yeah.
Tell us in your own words.
Well, a lot of different things we saw going wrong in the United States. One of them, a big one for us, was the chemtrails. That was pretty obvious. Grid pattern in the sky every day, planes spraying the poison. So we didn't want to be sprayed like bugs. So we wanted to get away from that. And, the fact that the police were becoming militarized, and just a lot of things in the States that were just going bad. And we're really glad now that we made the decision to get out of there. So Uruguay is really probably the safest place in South America. One of the nicest places, and it's on top of the world's second largest aquifer. So we have fresh water we get right from the mountains here. And it's a really, really beautiful kind of tranquil place here.
Now, I do have some friends from Guatemala. And a lot of people here are going to Mexico. There are people leaving Glastonbury, getting the heck out of the Great Britain. I mean, there's a lot happening today. I've just been hearing about things, but let's not date it too much. We're talking here in early February 2022. And there's a brilliant lady here in London. She ran a wonderful art centre. And she sent me some photographs of her in the jungle, almost like Jane, Tarzan and Jane in the jungle, eating the most wonderful fruit. And I think it's Guatemala. Is that north of you or south of you?
That's way north.
Way north. That's almost
We are
central.
near the southern tip. We are near the southern tip, right next to Argentina, but we're almost down there to Tierra del Fuego. I mean, we're way down there.
Wow. Yeah. My geography is good, but not that good. But that's excellent. I mean, that's almost as far south as New Zealand. Is that right?
Yeah, it could be around the same
But it's on the other side.
latitude,
Yeah.
longitude. Yeah, it could be the same. Yeah.
But you're only 3 hours.
Pretty.
You're only 3 hours difference in time, which is strange. You're in the southern hemisphere,
Yeah.
3 hours different in time, and in paradise.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, Uruguay's got its own problems, just like any place, but comparatively, it's paradise here. And as far as chemtrails go, they are few and far between. They do happen. I think they probably spray over in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and they just blow over this way. But most of the time, we have clear blue skies here. And the people here are really lovely. They're really, really kind and very friendly people here.
Are you a Spanish speaker or is it Portuguese?
Spanish.
Spanish, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. What happened? How did things start for you in this situation? And your ET contact. I mean,
yeah, my life. Yeah, it's been my whole life. Well, it started when I was 4 years old, and I'm 53 now, so it's been quite a long time. So I'll go ahead and tell you the story of how this started. When I was about 4 years old, I lived with my parents in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, and we lived in a log cabin, and it was, probably a mile away from any other neighbors. It was very, very beautiful place. I really loved it there. So my parents were very loving and kind to me. And every night when they tucked me into bed, they would sing to me and read stories to me. And it was really nice. But when they left and they turned the light out and they closed the door, I was alone in my dark room. And I wasn't afraid, but I was really curious because I could feel energy around me and I wanted to see what was there. So I always kept my eyes open for as long as I could before I fell asleep.
You're talking the age of 4.
So at 4 years old, yeah. So I started, as I was doing this, I started seeing images which seemed to almost be on a screen in front of me, maybe about 2 foot in front of my forehead. And I started to see images that I liked, like candy and ice cream and toys and things that I wanted to see. And I know now, looking back at it, that was my third eye working, and I was projecting these images. So I kept doing this every night. And one night I saw people walking into my room. They were humans. And this wasn't, just on my screen in front of my head. This was walking across the dark room. And so these human people, it was only 2 people, sometimes 3, but never more than that. And they seemed very friendly and they were smiling and they walked right up to my bed and they looked down at me and they started talking to me, but I could never hear them. I could see their lips moving, but I could never hear them. It was as if there was a pane of glass between us, some type of barrier. And I really tried to hear what they were saying, but I couldn't. And they would realize that after a few minutes and they would smile and they'd wave to me and they'd walk away. And I do wonder now if those were relatives of mine, maybe my great-grandparents or something.
I mean, what style of
so
clothing
that happened.
what kind of dress wear did they have? Any hints about what they looked like? Hairstyles?
I didn't notice anything unusual about their dress or hairstyles. They just seemed like regular people to me at the time.
In other words, in the same basic time zone and
pretty much, they look like they could have been from my family. So as I kept doing this every night, one night I had actually already fallen asleep, but I woke up during the night and I saw the star people for the first time. To me, they looked like stick people. Like their arms and legs were literally like very, very thin, like sticks. And they had big, round, bulbous heads, but I could not see any of their facial features. I don't know if that's because I had never seen them before and I didn't know how to perceive that. But they were holding hands. It was two of them, and they were walking towards the foot of my bed. And I got scared then, and I sat up in my bed and I screamed. And my mother came running into the room, and as she did, they disappeared. And I told her what happened, and
Now,
you
when
know,
they
to her, it's
disappeared,
okay, honey.
sorry, when they disappeared, did they run away or did they dissolve away or what?
They vanished. They just, it was maybe like my ability to see them drowned out or something. They were still walking towards me and they kind of vanished into thin air when my mother came in the room. So I was doing that kind of thing every night, and my third eye was apparently working. And there is one picture that I sent you. It's a drawing I did, and it's called "The Third Eye and the Etheric Plane." It's me and my mother, and we were actually talking about this a couple of weeks ago. We were laughing about it because we both remember it very well. But one night I was sleeping in the bed with her, and during the night I woke up and in the darkness of the room, I saw a play tea set. And I always wanted to have one of those to have tea with my dolls. And ice cream and candy and shiny wrappers, the kind of things that I liked. And they were all lit up with these beautiful colors. And so I tried to grab at them, but I couldn't reach them. So I stood up in the bed and I tried to reach, but it just seemed like no matter how hard I tried, it was almost like my hands were going right through the images. But to me, they looked very real. And I started jumping up and down to try to reach them. And my poor mother was, I could tell she was getting a little scared actually, because she was saying, "Bonnie, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, Mommy, I'm trying to get the tea set up there." She's like, "What?" And so I stopped what I was doing for her sake because I didn't want her to be frightened. So I sat down and we went back to sleep. But that's the kind of thing I was doing as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old. And that's how it started. And so I was scared of them the first time I saw them, the star people. But by the time
Why
I
did you
was
call
7
them
years
star
old,
people as opposed to just other dimensional beings that are terrestrial? What made you feel they were not from here, but out there? What gave you that impression?
I came up with that label when I was about 19. And I called them star people because they always seem to be coming from the stars. But actually, I do think now that they're definitely multidimensional. They could be from here. They could be sharing the same space with us, but on a different vibrational frequency. So I'm not really sure where they're from. I do sometimes call some of the star people, I call them Pleiadians, because it's really like the best thing I can compare them to. But they're definitely like etheric beings. And they taught me how to raise my vibrational frequency and to go out of body and meet with them. But that happened later when I was about in my early 20s. They taught me how to do that. But when I was a little girl and this started out, the first time I saw them, I was scared. But by the time I was 7 years old, I was friends with them. And I don't know what happened between 4 and 7. I don't have a memory of that. I remember my entire life, but I don't remember, the dreams or experiences I had at night during that time. But by the time I was 7 years old, they were coming into my room, and I was glad to see them. I was fine with sitting up and throwing the blankets off and just going with them, and
So
one would be on either
how did
side
the
of me.
communication work? I mean, how did it go from being scared to accepting them, and where did you go, and how
Yeah.
did what images did you get in your mind, or what?
Well, like I said, I don't really know what happened between the age of 4 and 7. Somehow I became friends with them. I did have an experience when I was about 7, where this little being ran into my room, and he was very small. I was only 7 years old, and he was shorter than me, so he was very small. And he did not have a big head and big black eyes. He just had like a normal little sized head. But I was calling him my friend, and to me, he seems like he was one of these multidimensional beings. But he rushed into my room and woke me up and got me out of bed, and I went with him. I held his hand, and he said, "We have to hurry and hide because there were some bad men coming into the house to look for me, apparently." And I called these bad men robbers. And so this little star person and I considered him to be my friend. Don't know how it got that way, but I went with him, and we came out of my bedroom into the living room, and there was a little hallway closet. We went into the closet, and we stood there, and we held very still, and we were very quiet, and we could hear what sounded like men coming into the house and looking through the house. And we listened for a little while, and we felt like they had gone. They went out the door. And so when we thought the coast was clear, we went out of the closet and to the living room, and we looked out the front door, the window of the front door. Seemed like the coast was clear. So me and this little star person, we went out the front door, out onto the front porch. But by the time we got down the steps to the front yard, these 2 men came rushing at us, and they were humans. I believe these men were secret government, I call them
Yeah.
government agents.
Were they dressed
And
like the
so
infamous man in black, or what?
I don't think that they were wearing black. I don't have a great memory of what they were wearing. They could have been wearing suits, but they weren't wearing black. I just ran. I just ran for it. My little star friend ran a different direction, and I went to my neighbor's house across the street. And I was very familiar with their house. I'd been there plenty of times. So I ran into their back door, into their kitchen, and these men had no problem catching up with me. So they came into the kitchen, and then we played this little game of running around the kitchen table, but there was 2 of them, so they had no problem, stopping me. So this one of them, the way he stopped me was he put his foot out and he let me trip over it. And face first, I fell forward. And as I fell, he had a little piece of metal, and he jabbed it right into my lower rib on my left side as I fell. And after that, the scene changed, and I woke up in this room, and I was laying on a table, on like a cold, hard metal table. And next to me was another girl, but she was much older than me. She was maybe like 18 or 20. And she was on a table too, and we were both strapped down to these tables. Well, I got to look around the room a little bit. I got to see what was in front of me. And I could see these double doors and a stairway, well, 2 stairs that led down to where we were. We were kind of in a lower part of this room. And later, I would recognize this place again because I went back there a number of times, and I know that it's underground, and I know that there are doctors and nurses there, and they are human.
Did they have
And
any kind of
so,
logo on or insignia on their uniform? Any kind of symbol?
no, no, not that I remember.
Nothing at all.
No.
Nothing around which gave any kind of identification. Were the labels on the corridors
No, but
numbers?
in later years, in later experiences, I saw different military uniforms, and they were Air Force, Army, Navy. So that was, yeah.
With,
I
and
so I had definitely been
were
in.
the American Air Force?
Yeah, they seem to be American. Yeah. So back to this one experience, the first time I went there, me and this other girl, and she was trying to comfort me, and I was also trying to help her. We were helping each other to try to calm down. So these two men that had actually caught me and brought me there, apparently, they leaned over us in kind of a mean way, and they said, "We're going to coat you with gold and turn you into statues." And I don't know what that meant, but in my 7-year-old mind, I thought, well, if I get coated with gold, I'm not going to be able to breathe and I'm probably going to die. So it was kind of a scary thing. But I ended up, that's where my memory blanks out. And I woke up the next morning and seemed to be just fine. But that was the first time I remember going into that military base. And later I did go back there, and there was one doctor in particular who worked with me and nurses that I got to meet. And I was so used to going there, and I really liked the nurses. They were very friendly to me. So when I was ready to start public school, my mother brought me to the local school, and I was a little bit advanced because I could already read a little bit. I could write my name, and I could count to 100 or something as a I guess it was 4.5 or so. So they asked me, "Do you want to be in kindergarten, or do you want to go to first grade?" It was my choice. And I chose kindergarten because I had heard people calling it nursery school. So I thought that there were nurses there, and I remembered them from being there with the doctor and the nurses. And I thought, oh, I really like the nurses, so I'll choose kindergarten. That means nursery school. And so that's why I chose to go to kindergarten.
But that's bringing happiness to you. I mean, that's a happy thing.
Yeah, they were always very kind to me, and the doctor was nice to me. There were definitely some rough characters, like the mean men, the robbers who caught me and brought me there. But I don't. There are definitely bad times that I had later, much later years. But to start off with, it was okay. It was an okay place to go, and they were friendly towards me.
And I'm looking for any kind of light switches. What were the desks like? What were the tables? What were the physical furniture and rooms like? The lighting, was it like a hanging light with a bulb in it, or anything like that? Any colors?
Okay. The main thing I remember the most are the double doors, and I saw them many times. And there were two doors together. They were metal doors, and they both had windows in them, which kind of had like a crisscross, maybe wires in between the panes of glass, like protective thing on the doors. And they both had metal. I think they were like metal bars that you would like push to open.
Yeah.
I remember that, and there was kind of a little landing there and two sets of stairs on either side that came down. The colors of the room were mainly gray, and I actually did see a desk there. Later, the doctor who worked with me had a desk, and it looked like just a normal brown desk.
I mean, are we looking like 1950s, 60s sort of metal World War II, 50s office furniture?
Yeah, I mean, it was, well, this was back in, what was it, 1972 or so. So it was around like, that time period. It
Any
didn't
type
look
of
really old to me. It looked
typewriters?
like it was in good shape.
I mean,
I didn't see any of that. No.
any touch
No.
screen, computer type stuff?
No, not in that particular place. But I since then have been in many other military bases underground, and I have seen a lot in other places.
I mean, what I'm
But not in
saying
this
is
initial
that
place.
sometimes people see flat screen computer monitors 20 years before we got them.
Oh,
That
no, I
kind of
didn't
thing.
see anything like that. No. It seemed to be, in accordance with the time period.
Any windows? Any
No, there are
references?
definitely no windows. I feel like it was underground, and I always felt that way. There were no windows, and it was artificial light. I think the lights were um, up on the ceiling, very close to the ceiling. I didn't see any like light bulbs hanging, but
Or strip light, fluorescent, or whatever?
yeah, it seemed to be like a white light that was like a long rectangular type of light that gave off a glow. But in that initial experience, I didn't see too much because I was mainly focused on myself and the girl that was laying on the table next to me. And the double doors were kind of a feature that I always remembered, and I saw them again when I went back later.
And what was the girl like? I mean, was she sort of as far? Was it from a similar area of where you were, or any similarities? Did you have anything in common? Were you able to speak and exchange any information?
Um, she she seemed like she could have very well been a local girl from my area. She was she had white skin, and she seemed like, she was very friendly, and we were mainly focused on, we were looking at each other and trying to help each other feel better. She was very kind to me, and she tried to help me calm down and tell me that it was okay. And yeah, I don't remember too much from that original experience because I was 7 years old. So that's about all I can remember from that experience. But I ended up going back there, and seeing the double doors was always, always jogged my memory. But I ended up going back to that place not too long ago, maybe 10 years ago. And I was standing there with the doctor. He was much older, and I said to him, I remember you. I remember when you used to have your desk over there. And I pointed towards the double doors, and that desk was the one I described to you. And he looked at me like he was really shocked that I had remembered that. And during that experience, I saw a bunch of children, maybe like 10 children, come into the room. And they were standing up there near the double doors. It was like a little platform. And I went up there and I stood next to them. And the nurses came over, and they brought each child a little yellow rubber bracelet, and they put it on their right wrist. And the nurse came to me, and she put one on my wrist, and I just smiled, and I took it off and I threw it on the floor. And she came back and put it on my wrist again. And the doctor said to her, "You don't have to give her one. She doesn't need a bracelet." And so I took it off and I gave it back to the nurse. So, apparently they're still there and they're still doing their thing. Some of the nurses, um, the older nurses were still there, but there were a lot of new nurses. But the doctor was the same doctor.
And did he have a white coat with a stethoscope and a thing on the head, or what? A clipboard?
Normally they do wear white lab coats. I don't think that he was at the time. I do remember, I do know pretty much what he looks like. He's pretty tall. He's probably about 6 foot tall, and he's white, and he has black hair. And he changed a little bit over the years. And when I saw him about 10 years ago, he was kind of balding on top, but he still had black hair, and he kind of had a bit of a beard, and kind of like a goatee kind of thing.
So they looked as if they had a life outside in Civvy Street in yeah, civilian world.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So what happened
So
with the? Yeah.
so yeah, that was when I was really young, and then things started to change a little bit as I got older and was becoming a teenager. I I had another experience when I was 9 years old and then 11 years old, but it kind of started to die out as I was a teenager, because I think it's because I was focused on daily life and I was just too busy to pay attention to what was happening with that.
What about your school life?
Um,
What about your?
yeah.
Were you clever? Were there any sort of changes that happened?
What do you mean?
Well, did they give you additional powers? You know.
Well, it wasn't until I was about 19 years old that I met the star people again, because during my teenage years, I kind of forgot about them and moved on with my life. But when I was 19, I got a book written by Edgar Casey, and he talked about dreams and how if you write down your dreams every morning, you can discover your own personal dream symbolism, and make like a dream dictionary for yourself. So I started writing my dreams down every morning. And at first I didn't remember everything, but it took me probably about 4 months to train myself to do that. And then I was writing down, I would have like 3 or 4 dreams every night, and I could write them all down in the morning when I woke up. And so I was able to start to see the symbolism in my dreams, and that was really cool. But there was this other thing that was happening where these beings were coming to visit me. And I didn't quite know what to think about it at the time because I'd kind of forgotten. And so I just wrote it down and I didn't make any judgment on it. I just saved it for later. And then I got a copy of the book Intruders by Bud Hopkins. And I I tried to read that book, but I didn't get very far into it before I felt scared and I just put it down. I couldn't read it. But after a couple of months, I decided I'm going to make an effort. I want to read this book. So I did. One day I sat there and I was reading, and I didn't get too far. I was probably a couple chapters into it, and it just hit me like a trigger, like a trigger effect in my mind. And I realized that this was very similar to what was happening with me with these visitors that were coming. And after that, I started seeing the star people at least once a week and sometimes twice a week. So in my early 20s, for about a 5-year period, I call it the Star People School, because they were actually teaching me and training me. And they taught me how to defend myself against psychic attack, whether it was from aliens or humans or any type of negative entity. They taught me how to protect myself. So that was one of the things that happened. They also taught me how to raise my vibrational frequency. And they did that by coming into my room at night as I was going to sleep. And they would help me. In the beginning, they were helping me raise my frequency and they would lower theirs. So we would kind of meet halfway. And after a number of years of doing this, I started doing it on my own. And
Now, how
so,
did you raise your frequency, and how did they lower theirs? And in what way do you mean raising or lowering frequencies? Was it a mental process or what?
yeah, it was what would happen is I was physically laying in the bed, and it was as if, I was going to sleep, and they would come into the room and they would help me. They were basically helping me leave my body. My body would become very tingly, and there were some times when I couldn't move anything except my eyes and my head, but I was calm about it. I was okay with it. And whatever they were doing, it was for us to meet up, and so they could really interact with me, because physically, I think they can visit physically, but for a short time. And it's more like an out of body etheric type of experience.
Yeah.
And this is just the way that I viewed it was, and what they told me was that I needed to be on the same vibrational frequency as them, so we could be like on the same channel and we could interact together. And I'm not sure how they were lowering their frequency, but it did seem to be like a mental thing. And learning with them was really about like mental focus. And it was more of a psychic thing. It definitely affected me physically. What it did was it took my consciousness out of my body. And there is a drawing that I sent you of the star people taking me right out of my body.
Yes, I saw that. It was as if they were pulling you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were pulling
disturb
my
you?
conscious awareness
Was that
right out of my physical body. But I could stop it if I wanted to stop it. And there were times when I said, no, I don't want to go. And that would just bring me right back into my physical body. So it was, you know, it was a choice. And also, sometimes I knew ahead of time if they were going to come for a visit. If I knew beforehand, like before I went to bed, and I knew this because I could feel their energy and I knew that they were nearby. Sometimes it would make me a little anxious or nervous, and I would run down the hallway into my bed and, you know, throw the covers over my head, and I'd be a little nervous. And if I did that, if I had any fear at all, they wouldn't come. They just didn't show up. And according to them, it was because we couldn't meet up on the same frequency because I was feeling fearful, you know, or
I'm
anxious.
trying to see how you raised your frequency. How do people raise their frequency? What does that mean? It's a bit of a vague term.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. Well, when I talk about raising vibrational frequency now, it's about having love in your heart and focusing on being happy and not getting dragged down into fear or anger or sadness, because those are like lower vibrations. So if you want to live in a higher vibrational frequency, you focus instead on happier things, you know, like you know, whatever your happy thought is, and bringing yourself up out of a depression and being okay with the world. And even now when things are so crazy and chaotic, to be able to be happy throughout the day and make good choices and get rid of all your bad habits and start living a life where you're excited about living and you're enjoying life. And this is the way that I raise my vibrational frequency now. It's about becoming more consciously aware. It's really about like mentally raising your consciousness. So, and this is what they helped me do through all of this teaching that they did with me.
So explain the teaching.
And they taught me.
Explain all that.
Okay.
How did you go? Did you go to class or something, or
Yeah,
set
I
you
did
courses?
go to class.
Did you have homework?
I actually kind of did have homework. Sure. So when I went with the star people and they were teaching me, this happened when I was out of body. I would leave my physical body and my conscious awareness went with them. And sometimes we'd just be outside, like in my own yard, or sometimes we would go on one of their ships. And I saw all different types of craft throughout the years. And I also worked with different types of star people, but mainly the ones that I worked with, I calling them Pleiadian. They were tall, probably somewhere between 5 foot, 6 foot tall, sometimes even taller, with rather white skin. Okay.
So I think what I asked there was about how they taught you. How did the teaching and all that happen?
Okay.
Or did you answer that when I was plugging things in?
Well, I answered part of it, but I will go ahead and continue talking about it.
There's nothing like a technical difficulty.
Okay. Yeah, I know. It happens.
Yeah. Okay.
So so my time with the Star People, my teaching and training with the Star People would happen when they would come and take me out of my body. My conscious awareness went with them. And I really think I went to this place with them. I think it's the etheric plane. I call it the alternate reality. It's just where I was not in my physical body. I was out of body. And I was with them. And first of all, they taught me psychic self-defense, how to protect myself against attackers, because I ended up needing to know how to do that.
So
And
how did that teaching happen? Did they have a blackboard, or did they write? How did they speak to you? How did the course happen? Because I mean, we've had psychic self-defense courses here. How did that?
Okay.
Just take us through an actual teaching lesson.
Okay. What they did was, a lot of the communication was telepathic, although occasionally they did speak to me out loud. And a lot of the training happened through what I call fake scenarios. It was almost like a holographic room, like something you might see in the Star Trek series or something, where they would put me in this room and a scene would appear around me, and I had to, for example, someone would come rushing at me with a knife, let's say, and I would have to protect myself. I mean, in the beginning, it was very simple things because I had to learn how to do it. But they would put me in these different scenarios where I had to defend myself. And this is how I learned how to do it, basically. And they were also teaching me how to use energy to create something. I called it energy manipulation at the time. Now I call it manifestation. But they taught me how to move energy throughout my body, and I could gather up an energy in my hand and make like a ball of white light in my hand. So that was the first thing they showed me how to do. And it was really about mental clarity and focus, and probably about using my third eye. And my third eye was already open and working. Clearly, that was how I met them to begin with.
Have you heard of the phrase total intent manifest?
No, I haven't heard that.
Total total intention manifestation.
Okay.
Maybe to.
Yeah, it takes a strong intention, and it takes so much concentration and focus. And I practiced this over and over again. So the first thing they taught me was to hold my hand out and use that subtle energy that I could move throughout my body and gather it up into a ball of light in my hand. And then once I had that ball of light in my hand, I could morph it into something else. And I was making flowers and things like, an apple or an orange, just small objects that would fit in my hand. And then as they were teaching me this self-defense, I started creating a knife in my hand. So the reason why I learned pretty soon after why they were teaching me this self-defense was, sometimes after a visitation with these Star People, the secret government agents would show up. And this was also happen during the night and in very vivid dreams. But I think that possibly they also had a way to take me out of my body. And these government agents, they would ask me questions. They were pretty nice to me in the beginning. They would say, "What did you do with the Star People, and what did they say to you?" And I would tell them everything. I just told them everything because I didn't know any better. I was, 19 or 20 years old. And after a couple of years, I decided it was not a good idea to talk to them anymore. And so instead of coming to me and asking me questions, they sent psychics, military trained psychics. And what they would do is try to scare the crap out of me. to make me so fearful that I had no control over myself and they could do anything they wanted
And that
to
would
me,
drop your
and they could.
frequency, and then that would make you more vulnerable.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's another reason to be in a high frequency is that you have control. And as I was saying earlier, my motto is never be afraid ever, because when you're afraid, you have lost control. So the star people taught me this, how to defend myself and how to create things, how to use energy to create small objects. And they also started talking to me about the shift. And they said that there would be uh, physical changes on the earth, but also the most important part of this shift was of conscious awareness, that people who had love and care in their hearts and they were living in, higher vibrational frequencies of love and light, these kind of people would be able to shift up into higher levels of awareness and into another dimension, to have a clearer perspective on life, and to remember who they truly are, their true spiritual eternal selves. So this was the most important part of the shift for humanity. And they said that most people were not going to make it through the shift because everybody's at different levels of learning, and most people right now are just not there. They're not ready to do a shift like that.
Is this something which
It
happens
takes,
regularly with civilizations? The time
right.
comes when they leave.
Yes, it does. It's like these cycles that we go through on Earth, and it does keep happening, and there's resets along the way. And I think that's what we're going towards now. I think we're starting to really experience the shifting and this awakening that's happening. So they started telling me about this back in 1988. And of course,
Now,
back
what
then,
happened in 1988? That's a very important year.
oh, really?
Yeah. That's when I was able to
Why is it important?
manifest a massive radio station, and was able to do something absolutely unbelievable. It was a
Oh,
wonderful change, and there was a lot of other things seemed to happen in '88. I think they were going to have some kind of UFO disclosure then,
mm,
and then in '89, that's when the first saucer stuff at Area 51 was mentioned, and that whole
okay,
total change. But I think
right.
they've militarized that. They've tried to make it into something that the certain agencies will have a control over that, which of
Yeah,
course defeats the whole purpose of the whole thing.
yeah. So yeah, the star people, the biggest lesson really was facing my fear. And that was like the first thing I had to learn, was to get past my fear and enable, in order to be able to do all these other things, to learn all these other things. And so I went through this training with them. It mostly happened at night after I went to sleep, and I learned how to go out of body by myself and meet with them. And nowadays they don't come into my room anymore, and none of that has to happen. I just simply go to sleep and go out of body and meet with them. And yeah, it's been a whole process of learning. And so back in 1988, I was 20 years old then. And so for about a period of 5 years, I went through this training with them, and I actually graduated, and I was there with other humans. These classes that I was in, there were other humans there with me. And when I was younger, the classes were pretty big, but as I got older, the classes got fewer and fewer people who were going up level after level
Can
of
you
psychic
describe
awareness.
your classmates? Can you describe what it was like? I mean, what was this like? Was it like at university or big halls,
Well,
wooden desks
it
with
was
quills, like in Harry Potter or something?
um we weren't normally at desks, although on occasion we were sitting at desks, but mostly we were we were gathered together. Sometimes we were on a ship with the star people inside of their craft in a room, and it would be psychic testing. And these were other human other humans with me around the same age as me, and we were in a class together, and we were all learning the same thing at the same time. And like, for example, one time they had a little flat little pad that would fit in your hand, and when you push different sections on this pad, they would make a musical tone. And somehow psychically, we were supposed to know what the music was, and we were supposed to reproduce the music. And so everybody in my class did this. We passed the thing around, and we all did it. Some of us did good. I did good. Some of them couldn't do it. And the people who couldn't pass these tests, they just went back home and they didn't come back again. So it was all about learning and advancing in levels with this psychic testing. And so my class over the years got smaller and smaller. But even now, like in the past 5 years or so, I've gone on to, more advanced training now. And now there's only 5 people in my class. And they are people that were with me the entire time. So we've been classmates all of this time, and we've all been through the same lessons. So what happened when I actually graduated from the school, I went to a little graduation ceremony with my fellow classmates. This all happened in the alternate reality on the etheric plane, I think.
I mean, what sort of place was it? Was it like a college, or was there a building with trees? Was there sunshine?
That place was inside of a building. It really looked fairly human-like. It was a rather large room. My best memory of that moment was standing in a smaller room off the side of this large room. I think the large room is where we had this graduation ceremony. And I was wearing a white cotton gown, which had lattice work, like a very nice design on the edges of the sleeves and the bottom hem of this dress. All of us who were graduating in the class were wearing the same white gown. And I was standing there with a star person, and we were standing in what seemed to be a very human-looking a bar. I didn't see any drinks or anything, but it was like a wooden counter that kind of wrapped around. And there were two star people standing behind this bar, and another one standing there talking to me. And he was very casual. He's kind of leaning on his arm, kind of leaning and relaxing. And he said to me, and I remember this, he said that, if you ever get a cold, you can eat red clover and it will help your symptoms. And I always remember that. I don't know why I brought that up, but so that was just kind of a casual get together where everybody in my class went through this little ceremony. And after that time, they stopped coming around for a while. They would come back maybe, well, they still came. It was more like once a month instead of once or twice a week. They come basically just to check up on me. But the idea was that now that I had graduated, I would go out on my own for a while and continue learning on my own. And I did, because the things that they had taught me about how to go out of body and travel to all these different places, I was doing it on my own now.
Now, what do you mean by different places? Are you dealing with different dimensions? Did you know where to go, or did you just go and explore?
I was exploring. Yeah, I didn't really know exactly where I was going. I was exploring. And a lot of it was going out of body and being on Earth and just flying across fields and forests and just enjoying being out in nature. But I ended up a lot of times not even doing this on purpose. It would just kind of happen randomly. I didn't really know what I was doing yet. I was just experimenting and exploring, but I would end up going into different planes of existence, like different worlds. And I don't necessarily think these are like off planet. I just think that they are different frequencies or different dimensions. I think that there are different planes of existence where people live that are very similar to humans. And I've been to a couple of these places and met people. And going there was, I'd go to sleep and go out of body, and then I'd basically wake up in this other place. It would really happen randomly.
I mean, did you see other creatures like the Sasquatch, other life forms, were the time in those other places the same time as this? I mean, would you be going to places which were like in the 15th century or something, or the future, or different kinds of people altogether?
Yeah. Well, it was more like, it seemed time is such a weird thing, because time works differently with the star people. You know, like I could be with the star people for 3 or 4 hours, and when I get home, you know, only a couple of minutes went by.
Yeah.
Or one time I was with the star people for 2 weeks, and when I got home, 3 hours had gone by on my clock. So I think when you go out of body, things change a little bit and time is not so relevant anymore. But the different places that I went to, these people mostly seemed to be human, and they had very similar buildings like we have, you know, structures, and it wasn't that alien to me. It was kind of familiar, the different places that I went.
What did it
Although
sound like? Did you experience sound?
Yeah, things seemed very similar, and some people actually spoke to me, and it came out as English, as my own language. Some people were only using their mind to communicate telepathically. And I did also end up going to visit with different types of star people, and different types of star people that I worked with, they would sometimes bring me to where they lived. And some of them actually live on Earth, and some of them live in different planes. I was surprised. One time I went to supposedly where they live, and these star people they were not the same tall whites. They weren't like Pleiadians. They were looked more like zetas. They kind of had the big heads with the big black eyes.
Well, your book's got I mean, the thing you've got on the book is quite interesting. You know, that it looks like almost a star child that the late Lloyd Pye had.
Oh, which book? Which book
That's
is it that you're looking at?
Shift book that I just showed.
The Shift. Oh, okay. So the front cover. Yeah, I can't see the pictures either.
Yeah.
I can't see any of that.
Yeah, I just realized that. Yeah.
Okay. So
it's the one on your website, the Shift. With the gray,
that's my new...
it looks like a gray, a happy gray.
Yeah. It's a happy gray. Yeah, he's kind of a gray. I use that picture because lots of people recognize that as being an alien, and so I put that on the front cover. As far as the grays go, most of them are not very nice and not very friendly, but there are some that have worked with me and have been very helpful. But yeah, I knew Lloyd Pye, so that's kind of a cool reference.
Yeah, he was in this country. We did an interview with him before he left and passed on at Belinda Mackenzie's. It was a wonderful man to know that when he was in the UK. Yeah.
Yeah, really nice person. Yeah. So I ended up in that time period kind of, you know, I was exploring and I was just learning, and I would randomly end up in places. And occasionally I would end up on a ship with the star people, and they were quite surprised when I did that, and they would send me back home. They'd send me back into my body. But what I was just talking about, one time I went to this other plane where some of these star people live that looked more like the zetas. They're a little bit shorter. They're like 4.5 foot tall, and their skin is like a cream color or a light tan color. And I was really surprised that their world looked very similar to kind of a luxurious type of human dwelling. I went inside one of their houses, and they actually had a bed, and they had taken shells. I think they got these shells from Earth, and they glued them or something. They put them on this headboard, and maybe they did that just for me. Maybe that was to make me comfortable or something. But these beings were very happy that I was there, and they showed me a book that described, and I wish I could remember it, but it described a lot about their life and where they live. And they actually made a chocolate milkshake for me because they knew that I liked chocolate milkshakes.
Hold on here.
And so
no,
they
hold
came
on.
out.
Stop. I'm throwing my hands all over the place here. I thought
Okay.
Earth was the only planet with chocolate. That's the only reason we had aliens here. Well,
No,
blow me
apparently
down.
they've got it. Yeah. And I don't know if they took it home from here or what they did, because I know
think it's probably they took it from here.
Yeah, they do collect things, including animals and human DNA and all kinds of things that they take with them. So yeah, it didn't really surprise me, but what they gave me was, and I sent you a drawing of that too. It's 3 star people, and one of them's handing us this drink, and he gave me, and it really was more like warm, tepid water with some cocoa powder floating in it. It was pretty gross, but I drank a little bit of it and smiled and pretended I liked it. But they did a lot of things it seemed like they were doing it just to please me or just to make me feel comfortable. And so, yeah, I also dealt with a whole lot of military abduction and psychic attack during that time. And I would occasionally, just randomly, end up in underground bases. And
do you want to take just a little break? We've been running an hour and 10 minutes. Do you want to then concentrate on the MILAB stuff?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Cup of tea or something.
Okay, be right back.